Hi, this is Adam Stofsky from Briefly, and we are here for the next episode of the Inland County's Legal Services Legal Information video series. I'm here with Veronica Garcia. Hi,
Hi, Adam.
Veronica. So today we're going to talk about a topic that I think is pretty interesting around housing law, and that's the obligations of the landlord and what to do as a tenant if the landlord is not meeting their obligations. So, Veronica, can you just start off by telling us, in very general terms, in most leases, what are the landlord's kind of core obligations, legal obligations?
I think one of the most interesting ones is the landlord's duty to keep the home habitable. And this has a few different meanings, but one thing that comes up a lot is making sure to have basic necessities like plumbing, electricity, heating, and safety features such as smoke detectors, secure windows and doors. Those are some of the big items that have to be maintained in a home that you're renting.
So, how do you tell if something is a habitability issue? Like, if you have, I don't know, I'm thinking about things in my own home that need to be fixed. Stains in your carpet, a weird smell somewhere, exposed wires, crack in the window, hole in the window. Is there like a list of things that are actually legal violations, or how do you
That's
tell?
hard. And it's not necessarily a one size fits all answer. If there's something that's concerning to you, um, there's a few questions that come up. Is it something that you caused? I mean, if there's a stain on the carpet and you have kids, did you cause the stain? Because chances are that's not going to be a habitability issue. Is it something that was there before you moved in? In which case, did you have a conversation with the landlord when you did your walkthrough? Otherwise, maybe it's something you need to bring to your landlord's attention because that's the next step. You need to make sure that you're notifying your landlord. And this needs to be done in writing. You can't just make a phone call, you can't just send them an email. And if you do send an email, make sure that it is documented and that you keep a record of it. This is one of the most important things that you can do. And a lot of people, unfortunately, sometimes fail to do this and will just say, I called them on this day. And when they end up going to court, it becomes really hard to prove when they notify their landlord of a particular issue at the property.
So you have to give the landlord notice in writing. So maybe you call them up and say, "Hey, look, I need you to fix the plumbing; it's not working, or replace the fridge." Um, and what if they don't do it? What do you do next?
Right. So if they don't do it, you have to give them a reasonable amount of time to fix it. And this is something that's interesting because what's reasonable to one person may not be reasonable to another. And it also depends on what the issue is. Now, if it is an area where you have a snowstorm and the heater's not working, then reasonable may be different than if it's a small drip in your bathroom and it's not really creating any major issues, right? Um, there's always a scale of what's reasonable, and it's not going to be, again, it's not a one size fits all. The issues can be very different. If your entire bathroom is flooding and it's the only bathroom in the home and it's flooding the entire unit, well, that's probably something that, could be considered pretty urgent and probably needs to be addressed immediately. And if that's something that is not being addressed, well, then when they don't fix it, you need to keep copies of that. And then if they do not fix it in a reasonable amount of time, then you have a licensed professional make that repair. And this is where repair and deduct comes in.
Can you just explain what that means for our audience? What does repair and deduct
Of
mean
course.
before you go on?
So, some of the things that you can do for repair and deduct is considered a remedy for issues that you may be having at your property when a landlord is not fixing those issues. And you can use this remedy twice in a 12-month period. And it must be reasonable and it must be documented. So, those two requirements have to be met. And you need to keep written notice to the landlord. So that's where you do have to keep all of your documentation. And you do have to keep your receipts. So if you do end up paying someone to fix that problem, and then you do end up withholding rent, make sure you keep those documents. And then the next month, you would withhold that from rent. Now, one problem that people get into is where they do not properly notify their landlord and they withhold rent, and then they get a 3-day pay or quit. So, this can create issues if you don't pay your rent, but you want to make sure you do it properly.
Okay, great.
And Adam, I do have one other note with repair and deduct. Now, imagine that plumbing issue was $1,000 and my rent is $1,500. Now, I'd still want to make sure I pay that extra $500. So it doesn't mean you don't pay any of your rent. It means you pay what the portion is beyond what the repair was. So you'd still have to pay any balance that would be due after the deduction.
What are some other options you might have at that point?
That's a good question. And obviously, not everyone has the luxury of repair and deduct. Maybe it's a repair that's going to cost more than rent, and not everyone has access to funds like that. So, the next option might be something that's called constructive eviction. And this occurs when the property becomes uninhabitable. So, that plumbing issue I mentioned, imagine that it flooded the entire apartment with sewage. Now, that's not a situation that anyone would want to live in. And if the landlord doesn't make those necessary repairs, this would allow the tenant to move out and break the lease without any penalty. And this is another situation where you would want to make sure that you're giving the landlord something in writing to let them know about the circumstances. It's also suggested to have some photographic evidence of this sent to the landlord so that you have support for the situation. And this isn't always something that's advantageous to tenants because you may have a lease that's actually in your favor, and getting out of it may actually put you in a worse position. So it's not always a great position to be in. But you do have options to report it to code enforcement. You do have options to report it to housing authority, and they may be required to, and when I say they, I mean the landlord may be required to provide some sort of monetary or rehousing for at least a temporary period. This is not something that would be required for a long term, but at least be able to help you in some sort of transition.
Okay, interesting. So we've talked about repair and deduct and constructive eviction. Can you actually just go to court and sue your landlord if you want to stay in the house? Is that a possibility?
So, unfortunately, once you're out of the house, it's really hard to get back in. One option you may have is going to small claims court and suing the landlord for damages. So, if you end up having to pay more at another property, if you end up having to expend any money for, say, new property, if things were damaged when the property flooded, you can sue your landlord for breach of warranty of habitability, and that can be done in small claims court, which unfortunately ICLS does not assist with, and you can't actually have any attorneys in small claims court, so it would just be you against your landlord. So any photographic evidence you have, anything you have that would help support your case, is something that will be helpful in that court.
How can inland counties help with these kinds of sort of repair and habitability issues for tenants?
I would recommend contacting our housing hotline. It's something that we can definitely give you some advice and potentially assist with writing letters or provide letter templates. So if this is an issue that impacts you, reach out to us and we'll see if we're able to assist.
Great. Thank you so much, Veronica.
Thank you, Adam.